And this is Spiritually Speaking, a podcast about the art and science of spiritual cultivation. So, in terms of the chapters, were there any particular chapters that sort of resonated with you or that you thought were particularly interesting?
We got down into chapter 15, actually, divine intervention. And you put a line here that you can't change what's going on around you until you change what's going on inside you. I started to find that very profound because I always want to change things around me. But when I change things inside of me, which is getting acceptance of what's going on around me, things that I'm powerless over, then I get peace. But when I'm fighting and trying to change external things I really have no power over, I have no internal peace because it's a struggle. And that really resonated with me. So that struggle is surrendering, take care of my spirit on the inside that will keep me having peace no matter what's going on outside of me. Being in a hurricane, everything's spinning around you, but inside you're in the eye and you have peace. That was like when I read that line, I could really identify with that. That was powerful. And there was a whole lot in the book that I could identify with. That was one of the ones that I really highlighted that I could really internalize.
Okay. Were there any characters in the book? I talk about a lot of different people, my experiences with them, some of which were good, some of which were difficult, but were there any characters that caught your attention?
Your struggles with people with white folks and racial issues. And that one that really stood out to me that was like trauma was the boss from Red Lobster, who was a racist. But there are other people. You talked about a guy named Dallas and a guy named Sammy that you talked about in there. And them guys very resonated with me because I've had experience with those guys and how they helped you on your journey to get you to where you're at today. Some of the main people that I connected with, I could identify that guy who was a racist. Then I could also identify those people who helped you along your journey to get you where you're at today.
So, did any emotions come up for you as you were reading through the book?
Cain, seeking love and acceptance from your family or from your peer, from your father or your brother, or dealing with a lot of disappointment. That was the main thing, dealing with a lot of disappointment and dealing with a lot of hurt. I could identify with that in your book. The one thing I can say is you were definitely an overcomer because you dealt with a lot of trauma, emotional trauma. And I believe we as young Black men in America, that's something we deal with, man. Not just racism, but just America in general. There's trauma here for us. Our lives are at risk every day when we step out the house. We never know if we're going to get shot by the police or just driving down the street is trauma because you don't know you're going to get pulled over and killed. If that's what we experience here as Black men and Black people in this country. But yeah, I can identify with a whole lot in the book, man, just from the trauma that you've been through as far as personal relationships and family dynamics all the way to your recovery process and getting to where you're at today, getting into the church and then getting disillusioned about the church. I can identify that I was one of those people who went to the church too and was going regularly and was a member and then, but then I became disillusioned behind the church and I stopped going. I started seeking spirituality outside the church. And it's not nothing really bad about the church, but it just wasn't for me anymore.
That's an interesting point you bring up because a lot of us can't find another lane to spirituality outside of the church. That's one of the things I think next level spirituality is going to open up. It's going to open up a lane where people can get access to information about spirituality because religion and spirituality, the way it goes is you can have spirituality without religion, but it would be difficult to be religious and not have any spirituality.
True.
Although I do see people who claim to be religious act in ways that would question their spirituality based on my definition of spirituality. Are there people who you believe could benefit from that kind of a lane, that kind of a community, if you will, a community where they can go and meet like-minded people who are on a spiritual journey or who want to be on a spiritual journey but don't have access to any kind of structure in order to move themselves forward.
You would have to get past the religious dogma that we're taught when we're young, that God is punishing fire and brimstone, and if you do anything wrong, you're going to hell and all that. First, you have to get past that mentality and open yourself up to other forms of belief, other forms of study. And that takes being open-minded to the fact that, no, it's not just one spiritual path. There's many paths of spirituality out here in society. And you have just to find your lane, one that fits you. That's really me. I believe it's about the group. It's about the collective. It's where the spirit works. Where you gain your spirituality, it's in the collective, it's in the group. It's about finding a like-minded group of people that you connect with spiritually. It's about honest sharing with those people, sharing honestly about what you're going through, tearing down those walls and those barriers that keep us away from these spiritual experiences that we can have. People respond to honest sharing. When you can get honest about your struggles with people, then that's when the spirit comes alive, because it's through identification.
There's so much in what you just said because the average person doesn't necessarily understand the value of gut level honesty. It's hard to tell on yourself,
Yeah, because
right?
everybody's
And
fronting.
it's
You gotta
hard.
keep a front up.
You do. This community that I'm working to build is actually called Break and Build. So what we're trying to do is break the chains, right? Break the chains that bind us spiritually so that we can build the life. We can build our best life. But we can't do that when we are tethered to these things like trauma, resentment, addiction. You and I know a lot about that. When we are
Mhm.
tethered to these things that continue to weigh us down, these things that continue to drain us. I call them life depleting things. Like when I'm resentful, it doesn't matter who it is, whether it's somebody at work or whether it's somebody in my family. I got family members who have held resentments against each other for decades, most of their life, hated each other. For what reason? Like, like having a resentment is like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. So resentment is life depleting, whereas forgiveness is life enhancing. But people don't know that.
Mhm.
So that's one of the things that I want to do in this community that I'm looking to build is to create a space where people can begin to move out of the chains that bind them and into the freedom that offers them hope and a better life.
But one thing I would say is takes a safe space, having a safe space to be able to be honest about your struggle, whether it's emotional, physical, abuse, whatever you're going through. A lot of times we put up that front, that mask that everything's okay. We walk around in society that thinking everything is wonderful and beautiful because that's what we're taught. What they say when you're a kid, don't let nobody know what's going on in this house. You're taught that. Never let nobody know what's going on in you. That's how I was raised, no matter what's going on. And there was a lot going on. Abuse, drug addiction, just a lot of insanity. But you were told they say, never let them see you sweat.
What you said is absolutely spot on because it's our secrets that keep us sick.
That's right. Secrets kill. They kill your spirit.
They do. They
Mhm.
smother you. And sometimes you don't even know that your spirit is being killed because what you're holding on to is in your subconscious. It's not in your face, it's not front and center, but it's going on in the background
Mhm.
and it's having an effect on you. I know that was true for me. Let's talk a little bit
About you or just about life?
about life.
So there were some things that I didn't in your book that you had a son and a daughter, another son and another daughter. And you may have told me about it, but it was like a revelation to me. Like, wow, he has a son and a daughter. And I believe you have some other siblings that your father may have had. And I can relate to that because I have a sister that I've never met before. And I have an aunt who was trying to connect me with her. She lived in Detroit, and I was trying to connect with her, but these numbers that we had couldn't connect with her. It's that sibling bond that you seek, even though I have a brother, but it would have been nice to know my sister. And I see that in your book where you would make connections with your children, your estranged children, and your other brothers and sisters.
And those are tough connections because there's a lot of pain there.
Yeah.
And it's difficult.
Yeah.
I remember when I first confronted my 16-year-old daughter, who I had denied,
Mm-hmm.
like to her face when she was 12 years old, right after I walked out of the courtroom, when the judge told me she was 99.89% my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked out of the courtroom. She was sitting in the waiting room, and I said, I don't know who your father is, but I ain't him.
Mm-hmm.
So I was caught in my addiction at that time. I had no sense of responsibility, and I didn't know that what was going on in the background, because my father did the same thing to me.
Mm-hmm.
He did the
Mm-hmm.
exact same thing
Mm-hmm.
to me. And so it's amazing how history repeats itself. Generational traumas continue to multiply. The hope shot is that we get an opportunity once we have broken the chain, we get an opportunity to make amends. And when I say make amends, I'm not saying I'm sorry,
Mm-hmm.
but to actually be there and to actually put
Participate in
forth
the
effort into building a relation.
participate in that religion. And that's one thing when we talk about our trauma and the things that we go through, especially as black men. Papa was a Rolling Stone mentality. Wherever he laid his hat was his home. But when all he left was alone, all he left us was alone. No legacy, no heritage, no wealth, no nothing. Father means you took responsibility. You raised, you nurtured, and you raised your kids to be men and women. But this guy who, I'm going to say, my sperm donor, to go to his funeral when he died, and all his friends, supposedly his best friends, say they never knew he had sons. That's a hurt piece. You're talking about a hurt. You're talking about a spiritual and emotional hurt piece. All you can do is just stand there and just take it. And the man who is supposedly your father laying in a casket, and that's all you have. From a kid to holding on to his pants leg, and he's saying he's going to come back and take you to the zoo or take you to the park, to 40 years later or whatever, he's laying in a casket, and that's all you have as far as the relationship. And that breeds a lot of resentment. That's the things that we go through as, and I ain't going to say just as men, where we get hurt along the way, the trauma that we have to deal with. And I don't have any kids today. So I'm grateful that even though I don't have a kid, I'm grateful that that tie was broken, that I didn't do that to my children. But I'm joyful with the hope that I have a brother, and he has 2 kids, and he nourishes his kids, and he takes care of his kids, and he's been in his kids' life their whole life. So I see the chain has been broken through just watching him being an absentee father and not taking care of your kids, and not, because that wasn't the experiences that we had. Because a lot of things I've been through, like I said, I have a brother. We've been through together. I have one brother, one sibling, and we've been through so many things together. A lot of the trauma that I've experienced as a kid and as a young man, we experienced together, all the way from being little kids in foster care to being adult men today, living lives free of drugs and alcohol and living spiritual lives. And both of us are not church going men, or some would say you need to, but no, we live spiritual lives today. And that's when we found our path through spirituality. And we're living, I want to say, our best lives beyond our wildest dreams. I will tell my brother to read your book, because he just come through a thing with a job that he was on, and he was a director at a job, and something happened, and they fired him without unlawfully or whatever, and took him to court, and he ended up winning his case. So he's gonna get a nice little settlement of some money, and it was good to see that, and it reminded me of you, the things that we go through. When I was reading your book, I was like, wow, this is some of the experiences my brother had dealing with corporate America and dealing with those positions, or how these places do you through racism or through whatever. But you persevere, you don't let that take you out. And that didn't take him out either. He stayed the course and got another director position somewhere else, and he's doing fine. But when I was reading your book and the struggle you was going through with UNLV and your tenure and all that, it reminded me of that. I was like, wow, this is kind of the same struggle that he's been through. So I said, I'm going to tell him to read this book. It might give him some spiritual uplifting.
Absolutely. In the book, I talk about 2 incidents where the first was with the corporate discrimination
Mhm.
and how it captured me, like it shut me down. I remember my great grandmother and them used to talk about having a nervous breakdown where you just fall apart mentally,
Mhm.
emotionally, psychologically. And that's what happened to me. And I quit. I didn't fight. So I learned from that lesson that, and I still came out of it. I still came out of it because when you walk in on a spiritual path and you're doing the next right thing, good things are always going to happen for you.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
So I don't really have, I really didn't have to worry that another door wouldn't open because
Mhm.
another door opened right on time for me. But the second time, like your brother did, the second time I fought, the
Mhm.
second time I took him to task. So
Right.
it's good to hear
Right.
that he stood and that he fought and that he won. Yeah, yeah, because we don't have to walk away. We don't have to quit. But it takes spiritual fortitude.
Mhm.
You talk about the peacefulness that you got to have because without peacefulness, my mind isn't going to function well. And I'm
Mhm.
not going to be able to think through and reason out my arguments to take my evidence to whatever the deciding body is on this. And it sounds like he was able to do all of that and win his case. So
Mhm.
hats off to him.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that part of your story reminded me of his story. And it's about spirituality, knowing that because there was a time in our lives as Black men where we had no recourse. We just had to take it, just take it. But today we don't have to take it. There are things we can do to rectify when we're wrong, to make right instead of just taking it and then dealing with resentment because we didn't take no action. That's what breeds resentment. That's what breeds anger because of the action that we don't take when we know we're supposed to take some action. Instead of just accepting something that we know is accepting a wrong. Today, no, we don't have to accept wrong. There are avenues and things we can pursue to rectify that situation. And that's the beauty of living in the times that we're in. They say the worst of times and the best of times. We're in some worst times, but we're in some best times too, because we have access to things that we never had access to, or our parents never had access to. They had to take that abuse. They had to take racial discrimination. They had to take that abuse that was given to them. But today, we're in a better place as far as when abuse does happen to us. So we can go and we can sue. We can use the criminal justice system. We can use mediation and things like that to our advantage. We don't have to go out on a tangent and just say, screw it, and take that abuse and internalize it. And then we want to hurt ourselves through alcohol, through drugs, through unprotected sex, through us trying to heal an internal problem with outside things. But today, we're able to take some positive action. And through that positive action, we get peace. That's what I liked about your journey with that. And I watched my brother's journey with that, how he took positive action and he used the system that they built to use against them. You got to hit them in the pocket, but that's all they understand. Sometimes all they understand is that money. So I'm just grateful that I see you when you went through your struggle with tenure and whatever, with Red Lobster and all that, but you got knocked down, but you didn't stay down. And I see him get knocked down. He didn't stay down. He got up and started fighting and using the system that we have today. But some people, when they get done wrong or whatever, either they ascend into addiction or alcoholism and they give up. Then you have other people who go insane and they pick up weapons and they go shoot up buildings and they do stuff like that. And that's real out here. When you hear about somebody shooting up someplace, it's usually some grievance that happened on the workplace because they couldn't think to do anything else. But today we have different avenues that we can pursue. So it's about using those avenues to pursue those objectives, to get retribution and to get justice. It doesn't have to be in a bullet today. It don't have to be in a bottle either. They're all things that we can use to get through. So I'm grateful for that, man. I'm grateful to see you go through that. And I'm grateful to see him go through that. I'm at the end of my career in the workforce. I'm looking at retiring soon. I don't know when, but I'm looking at retiring soon. So I try not to get caught up in those things as far as work and those issues, but I'm just trying to deal with life out here with people, man, and taking other directions. Just driving down the street can be a task. Somebody blowing on you, and you got to have your spirit right. It's dependent on your spiritual conditioning, just dealing out here in life. You sitting at the light, and somebody blowing on you, and you're like, What? The light is red. Some people, because people would be crazy out here, man. Just driving. They say, make the turn on red. But there's a sign that say no turn on red. But people will try to make you do stuff you ain't supposed to do. We got to really keep our spirit right. We're talking about spirituality. Your spirit got to be right. Even going out into these streets, man, will have you do stuff, man. People fighting in the street. And you're like, what are they fighting for? Nothing. The internet is unforgiving because people will take a video and post you. Once you will be famous. But
So wrap this up, Bruce. Is there any parting thoughts that you have for those people out there who haven't read the book,
hmm,
who may be considering reading the book? Is there anything that you would like to say to those people?
yeah, I would say definitely read the book because I'm sure you can find something there that you can identify with, whether it was as a child, as a young man, as an adult. But we're all basically all the same. We all go through some of the same experiences, especially as Black men and in the Black community. So we all dealt with some type of discrimination, or we might have addiction in our family, or some type of abuse that we've had to deal with. But it's about being an overcomer and know that there is hope, man, that you can book. I call this a book of hope, man, because you come through some things, man, that would knock down a lesser man or a lesser person who didn't have a spiritual base. And one thing I will say about your book is we grab on to drugs and alcohol seeking relief through life, but then we find that is not the answer or solution to our problems. And then we find something spiritual outside of us. And I know you talk a lot in there about 12 steps program and stuff like that, and working through your issues through 12-step work. I will say therapy can also be a help for somebody going through things. One thing I'd say about your book that I would encourage somebody to read is just you got to have a spiritual journey, and you got to have a special group of people also to help you, that you can't do it alone, because you do mention in your book some people along the way, all along the way, who gave you help and gave you encouragement. We definitely need people in our lives. The human, eternally, we say, I don't need anybody. But reality, we do. We always need somebody. We need at least one special person in our lives who believe in us, even when we don't believe in ourselves, whether it's your spouse or a good friend or somebody you need to talk, even if somebody in the clergy, somebody who believes in you when you don't believe in yourself. You are an overcomer who's been through a lot of things in the corporate world, in education, through family dynamic, through those struggles, but you've overcome them. You went through some things, right? We all go through, but we didn't let it take us out. And we overcome those things to be, I don't want to say healthy adults, but living our best lives just for the day and living drug-free. Living drug-free is important, not having anything outside of you to dull your spirit and to dull that conscious contact with the God of your understanding, with your higher power. You definitely need to live drug-free, alcohol-free. You got to have a spiritual base, man, to lean on. You got to have good people in your life to lead you along the way. You're going to go through some things in life, but you can overcome them and get to the other side and not have to destroy yourself. Because this society, this country here will destroy you. The dynamics of America will destroy you. But we can overcome and we can be prosperous people in this country. We come a mighty long way. Also, I want to say one more thing. When you went back to your great-grandfather or your grandfather that took you to that place where they were sharecroppers or indentured servants or whatever, never, ever, we should never, ever minimize what they went through, because what they went through got us where we're at today. So we should always uplift those people and never, ever forget about those people. And talk about those people, give them their flowers, man, because they went through things that you think the struggle we had, their struggle was 10 times greater. So we try to always uplift and honor. It is a 10th week this week through Juneteenth. We're going to honor those last slaves who were down in Galveston, who got freed from the horrors of slavery, because slavery was a terrible thing that we went through as Black people in this country. But you know what? We overcame anyway. We're still here. They didn't want us here. We were supposed to work and die off, but we're still here. and we're thriving in this country. And it ain't easy for us, but we're still making a way. They say making a way out of no way. This Juneteenth, man, honor those people, man. Honor your ancestors. Talk to those older folks in your family, those 80-year-olds and 90-year-olds. Talk to them. Listen to their stories. I was listening to my aunt yesterday, who I help take care of. And she was talking about going back to Alabama, talking about her great grandmother who was born into slavery, how they were, and going back down to Alabama in the summer and being in the outhouse, that country life there, that simple life that we come from. But we get in these cities and the fast and all that. But really, we go back to our roots, man. We're just simple country folks, man. Just trying to make it one day at a time. I just encourage those, man, to read your book. Anybody who hears this, read this book, man. It's very uplifting. It's about overcoming. It's about going through the struggle and getting kicked, getting knocked down, but getting back up and keep it moving forward. And that's what life's about, man. Getting kicked, getting knocked down, but getting up and moving forward. We all get kicked and knocked down one way or another, but we get up and we keep moving forward one day at a time.
I appreciate it, Bruce, tremendously, man. You mean a lot to me. I love you. You will
too, brother.
always be
Brother.
in my top 5 of friends.
Wait a minute. Because we selfish. I want to be number one. No, I'm just being silly. Yeah, I appreciate that, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's it.
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
Thank you
again,
for asking me,
and,
man. I appreciate it. And,
Yeah.
well, love you, brother.
All right, Bruce. Take care, man.
All right, my man. Peace.
We really hope you enjoyed this episode of Spiritually Speaking with Dr. Kwesi Asar. This concludes our thought-provoking discussion on topics related to spirituality. Stay connected to us by subscribing to this podcast and show your appreciation by sharing our message with others. Until next time, be kind to yourself and to each other.